Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the source material you've shared with us and cut right to the insights, shortcuts, and surprising facts you need to truly be well informed.
And today we are strapping in for a long, strange trip.
Literally, we are diving deep into the world of the Grateful Dead, a band that, they really transcended rock music to become this genuine cultural and business phenomenon.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
You really can't understand modern music without them because they operated in direct contradiction to how the industry worked.
Right.
Just look at the raw data. You get a 30-year career from 65 to 95. In all that time, they had exactly one top 40 single.
Touch of Grey.
Touch of Grey. And that didn't even happen until 1987.
Which is insane.
It is. But despite that, they were, for decades, one of the highest-grossing touring acts in American history.
It's the ultimate paradox. A band that was just commercially massive without ever really having commercial hits. They didn't follow the playbook at all.
Not even a little. The empire they built wasn't on record sales. It was on touring, it was on improvisation, and on this incredible community.
And that brand is still so potent.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
As recently as 2024, they set a record for the most top 40 albums on the Billboard 200 chart.
And that's not with new music. That's with old concert recordings.
Decades-old recordings. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so that confirms the mission for today. Our deep dive is all about unpacking the sources, figuring out their eclectic style, their whole philosophy on improvisation, the complicated life of Jerry Garcia.
And the Deadheads. You can't talk about the Dead without talking about the Deadheads.
The fiercely loyal community they build. They're truly the pioneering godfathers of the jam band world.
And we have to examine how that community and that musical structure made that contradiction possible. How you get so successful by sort of refusing to be commercial.
So let's do it. Let's start at the very beginning. Mid-60s, Palo Alto, back before they even plugged in. The prehistory of the Grateful Dead is so fascinating because it doesn't start with rock and roll at all.
Not at all. It starts with old-timey American folk music.
Yep.
The first version of the band was called Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions.
A jug band with Jerry Garcia and Ron Pigpen McKernan.
Exactly. And that sound tells you everything, because Garcia and Bob Weir, they weren't rock and rollers. They were deep in the American folk music revival of the late 50s and early 60s.
Right. And Garcia was already a master musician at this point.
A master banjo player, specifically. He played Scruggs style, that complex three-finger picking, and that is absolutely crucial for understanding how he later played guitar.
Okay, so they're playing acoustic folk, bluegrass, blues. What's the turning point?
Well, the whole culture was shifting, with the Beatles and Dylan going electric. But for them, the sources say the real catalyst was seeing a specific band.
The Lovin' Spoonful.
The Lovin' Spoonful. They saw them mix that jug band sound with electric instruments and a rock feel, and that was it. That's when they decided to go electric and get a, quote, dirtier sound.
So they plug in, and for a short time, they're called the Warlocks.
Their very first show as the Warlocks was at a Magoo's Pizza Parlor in Menlo Park, May 5th, 1965. And that's the core lineup. Garcia, Pigpen, Phil Lesh, Weir, and Bill Kreutzmann.
But they had to ditch that name almost right away.
Yeah, and this is one of those great little historical quirks. They found out another band called the Warlocks had already put out a record.
And the sources say the Velvet Underground also had to change their name from the Warlocks around that same time.
It suggests it was like the go-to generic name for any garage rock band in 1965.
So the Warlocks is out. They need a permanent name. And this brings us to the legendary origin story.
It's a story that just perfectly captures the era. It's got dictionaries, folklore, psychedelics.
And even the sources can't quite agree on the details.
Right. Phil Lesh says Garcia just picked up a Britannica World Language Dictionary and found it. But Alan Trist, their publisher, says no, he found it in a Funk and Wagnall's folklore dictionary while they were playing a word game.
And we know, according to one biographer, that they were smoking DMT at the time.
Which sounds about right for the period.
Yeah. But what's consistent is the definition they landed on.
And this is so important. The term Grateful Dead refers to the soul of a dead person or his angel, showing gratitude to someone who, as an act of charity, arranged their burial. It's a motif from folktales all over the world.
So it immediately grounds them in something ancient and spiritual. You've got gratitude, charity, death, rebirth. It's the bedrock for the whole Deadhead culture.
And that mythological vibe instantly fused with the most intense part of the 60s counterculture, Ken Kesey's acid tests.
The acid tests were the philosophical forge for the band.
Absolutely. Their first show as the Grateful Dead was at one of Kesey's parties, December 4th, 1965. Participating in those events was central to their development. The goal was to foster intra-band musical telepathy.
I want to stick with that idea of telepathy. How did the acid tests actually help create that? I mean, it sounds like more than just a chaotic party.
Oh, it's a genuine experiment. The idea was to break down the walls between the performers and the audience, and between the musicians themselves.
Right.
And in that, chemically fueled environment, you couldn't rely on normal cues. You had to communicate nonverbally. You had to listen. You had to trust that if you jumped, the collective would catch you.
And the sources are clear. They weren't the only ones doing this.
No, this was happening everywhere. Pink Floyd in the UK, Jefferson Airplane, the Velvet Underground. Everyone was trying to figure out what psychedelic music was supposed to sound like structurally.
And people started documenting it almost immediately.
Incredibly early. Just a month after their first show as the Dead, you have the first of over 2,000 fan recordings. January 8th, 1966, at the Fillmore. That culture of documentation started right at the beginning.
But all this experimentation costs money. Who was footing the bill? It wasn't a record label.
No, it was Owsley Stanley, the acid king.
The infamous chemist.
He was the LSD supplier for the acid tests, and he became the band's financial backer in early '66. He basically treated them like a living art project, rented them a house, bought them sound equipment.
Garcia said they lived solely off of Owsley's good graces because Stanley wanted a lab situation to design gear for them.
Exactly. It wasn't just patronage, it was R&D. Owsley was obsessed with perfecting concert sound. He was pioneering these massive sound systems that could get loud without feedback.
So the whole operation, the money, the tech, the music, the culture, it was all self-contained, funded by the scene, for the scene.
A perfect symbiotic loop. And that set up the core five founders, Garcia, Weir, Pigpen, Lesh, and Kreutzmann, to create the sound that would define them for the next 30 years.
Okay, so when you try to define the music of the Grateful Dead, you immediately run into a problem.
You can't pin it down. It's rock, it's blues, it's jazz, it's folk, country, bluegrass, reggae.
All mixed together with this psychedelic experimentation.
Right, which is why the promoter Bill Graham had that famous quote, "They're not the best at what they do, they're the only ones that do what they do. They just carved out their own universe."
And academics now look at them as, essential to the development of progressive rock.
For sure, because they left so much room for these long, exploratory, spacey soundscapes in their music.
A good pivot completely.
Completely. The same band that's doing this noisy psychedelia in '68 releases Working Man's Dead and American Beauty in 1970.
Which are basically Americana albums, acoustic, rootsy, traditional song structures.
They pioneered the whole genre. It's that dual identity. Psychedelic explorers 1 minute, acoustic storytellers the next.
And that duality all comes from their central philosophy, improvisation.
Unlike every other touring rock band that rehearses a set list to death.
The Dead refused. Garcia said, "We'd rather work off the tops of our heads than off a piece of paper."
And they stuck with that for 30 years. They'd pull from a list of about 100 active songs for any given show. They played over 500 different songs in their career.
It kept them on their toes, and it kept the fans coming back night after night. You never knew what you were going to get.
Exactly. But it wasn't just random noodling. The sources point to two very distinct, structured types of jamming they used.
Okay, let's break that down. The first one is the instrumental break.
Right. This is the more traditional rock solo. It's usually Jerry Garcia playing over a set chord progression. He starts with the melody, but then he builds these dynamic phrases that always, and this is key, resolve back to the chord tones. It's controlled chaos.
And the second type is the collective or modal improvisation.
This is the really unique stuff. This is the spacey part, the long segues between songs and pieces like Dark Star or playing in the band.
So what's happening there musically?
So instead of following a complex set of chord changes, the band will just hang on one or two chords, and they'll modulate between different musical modes or scales over that simple progression.
Okay, for a listener who doesn't have a music theory background, how does that sound different from a normal guitar solo?
That's a great question. Think of the normal solo as a high-speed chase. It's exciting, but it's on a defined road, the chord progression, and there's a clear destination.
Right.
Modal jamming is like painting. The canvas, the one or two chords, is static. So the musicians can focus completely on color and texture and rhythm. It's about the interplay between them. It requires that telepathy we were talking about because there's no map.
And to make that work, every single member of the band had to play a totally unique, non-traditional role.
Starting with Jerry Garcia. His guitar style was so fluid and spare. He never played a wasted note.
And a lot of that comes from his banjo background, right?
Yeah, directly. That Scruggs-style picking gave him techniques like syncopation playing on the offbeat and these rapid-fire arpeggios and chromatic runs. It's a style that's always pushing against the beat.
And his influences were all over the place. Jazz guys like Miles Davis and Django Reinhardt.
But also blues and country. He'd solo using rock and blues scales like the Mixolydian mode, but then he'd weave in notes from other scales like Dorian or pentatonic scales.
And the sources even mention him using melodic lines from Indian ragas.
Yeah, which he probably got from John Coltrane's interest in Ravi Shankar. So he's filtering world music through a jazz lens and bringing it into rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's incredibly complex.
Then you have Phil Lesh on bass, who might be the most revolutionary player in the whole band.
He wasn't a rock bassist. He was a classically trained trumpeter and music theorist. He thought about music completely differently.
He plays melodically. It's like he's a second lead guitar player.
Totally. And his signature move, the thing that gives the Dead their rhythmic bounce, is that he would constantly avoid playing the root note on the downbeat.
Why is that so important? What does that do for the sound?
It creates this floating, ungrounded feeling. If the chord is C, a normal bassist hits a C on beat 1. Boom. Lesh might hit a G or an E or something else entirely. It denies you that solid foundation, so the music always feels like it's searching.
And Bob Weir's doing the same thing on rhythm guitar. He's not just strumming chords.
Not at all. He modeled his whole style on the jazz pianist McCoy Tyner,
who played with John Coltrane.
Right. Weir was trying to replicate that dense, complex, harmonic interplay on his guitar. He used these unique chord inversions way up high on the neck, where a lead guitar would normally be.
So he's filling this space with these spiky staccato chords.
Exactly. He's the harmonic rudder, but he's constantly shifting it, pushing the improvisation in new directions. He blurred the line between rhythm and lead completely.
And finally, you have the two drummers, Bill Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart.
A famously complex duo. Kreutzmann was the anchor. He provided that steady shuffle beat, but he'd always throw in these little oblique juxtapositions to keep it interesting.
And Hart brought in the world music influence.
He'd studied tabla drumming, so he incorporated those rhythms, other instruments, and even non-Western time signatures like an 11-count measure. It was so much more complex than standard rock drumming.
So the big takeaway here is that it wasn't a band of individuals taking turns soloing.
Not at all. It was a single organism. Garcia's lead, Lesh's counterpoint, Weir's subversion, the drummer's complexity. It all worked together as one inseparable unit. That's how they got the telepathy.
The band's 30-year career is, it's a huge story. The easiest way to break it down is probably by keyboard player, which is kind of the tragic way to measure time.
It really is. It starts with the Pigpen era from about 67 to 72. And right away, they are just intrinsically linked to the counterculture.
Playing benefits like the Mantra Rock Dance with Janis Joplin and Allen Ginsberg.
And using their music for activism. They played a free concert at Columbia during the anti-Vietnam War protests in '68. They had to smuggle the band onto campus in a bread truck.
Classic. And the lineup is growing during this time.
Yeah, Mickey Hart joins as the second drummer. Yeah. And then Tom Constantin comes in on keyboards to help Pigpen, whose real strength was the bluesy organ, keep up with the band's, psychedelic journeys.
This era also gives us the Truckin' incident.
The foundational myth.
Yeah.
January 1970, they get busted by the cops at their hotel in New Orleans. 19 people arrested.
And the whole thing gets immortalized in the song Truckin', which just cements that image of them as these wandering outlaws.
But the Pigpen era ends tragically. He was in really poor health, played his last show in '72, and died in March '73 at age 27 from liver damage.
And that really changed their sound, right? He was the blues heart of the band.
He was. His death opened the door for a more jazzy, folk-influenced period, which is the Godcho era from '72 to '79.
This is when Keith Godcho joins on piano, and his wife, Donna Jean, joins on vocals.
And it's also a huge business shift. They form their own label, Grateful Dead Records, to take control of their own masters.
And it works. Week of the Flood in '73 is their biggest commercial success to that point.
They're touring like crazy, but then they take this unexpected hiatus from '74 to '76.
Right, to work on the Grateful Dead movie.
Exactly. And when they come back, they enter what a lot of fans think is their absolute peak. The spring '77 tour is just legendary.
The Cornell show, May 8th, '77. That's the one that's in the Library of Congress.
That's the one. And their drawing power is just immense. They play a show in New Jersey to over 107,000 people, a record that stood for almost 50 years.
But that era also ends with a departure and a tragedy. Keith and Donna Jean leave in '79, and then Keith dies in a car crash the next year.
Which brings us to the final chapter, the Midland-Welnick era, from '79 to '95. Brett Midland joins, and he's seen as the perfect fit. He brings this powerful Hammond B3 sound that really fills out their sound.
But this era is just completely overshadowed by the decline of Jerry Garcia's health.
And this is a critical turning point. By the early '80s, Garcia is in really bad shape. Weight gain, smoking, and a very serious drug problem.
The sources are specific. He was addicted to smoking a type of heroin known as Persian.
It was so severe, he was playing these abbreviated solo tours just to make quick cash to fund his habit.
And the band finally holds an intervention in '85.
They do. He agrees to go to rehab, but then he gets arrested for drug possession shortly after. He cleaned up for a bit, but the damage was done. In July of '86, he falls into a diabetic coma.
That must have been terrifying for everyone.
It was a real moment of panic. And the recovery was brutal. I mean, he literally had to relearn how to play the guitar. The coma had damaged his motor skills that badly.
That's incredible dedication just to get back on stage.
And when he came back, it sparked this huge revival. The 1987 album, In the Dark, becomes their bestseller, and it gives them Touch of Grey, their only hit single.
With the lyric, "I will get by, I will survive."
So ironic. But the tragic pattern with the keyboardists continues. Brent Midland dies of a narcotics overdose in July 1990, the third keyboardist to die.
Wow.
Vince Welnick joins, with Bruce Hornsby kind of bridging the gap for a couple of years to help him learn the catalog. But the whole touring machine had just gotten too big.
It's amazing they preach this collective idea of no leader, but everything seems to revolve around Garcia's health.
It was a huge source of tension, and Garcia felt that weight. He was worried the whole thing had gotten too big to stop, even though he needed a break. His health kept getting worse.
And he died of a heart attack on August 9th, 1995. He was 53.
Just 1 month after their final concert at Soldier Field in Chicago. And that was the end of the 30-year run.
It's so easy to just focus on the Grateful Dead, but Jerry Garcia had this whole other prolific career outside the band. He just couldn't be contained by one thing.
No, his acoustic roots were always there. He had the bluegrass band, Old and In the Way, and his long-running duo with the mandolinist David Grisman.
Which is featured in that great documentary, Grateful Dog.
Yeah. And on the electric side, he had the Jerry Garcia Band, which was all about these long R&B and funk jams. It was a chance for him to be the sole band leader.
His session work is where you really see his range. He played on over 50 albums.
50, including an album with the free jazz legend Ornette Coleman. A rock guitarist playing with Ornette Coleman. It's wild. He was even listed as the spiritual advisor on Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow.
I love the story about Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. It just says so much about their priorities.
It's one of the great '60s collaboration stories. Garcia played the pedal steel guitar on Teach Your Children.
A huge, iconic hit.
A massive hit.
Yeah.
But he didn't get paid in cash.
No, the payment was harmony lessons.
Harmony lessons. He traded his masterful steel guitar playing for vocal lessons for the Grateful Dead while they were making Working Man's Dead.
That is absurdly perfect.
Graham Nash taught them vocal techniques that you can hear all over that album and American Beauty. It just shows, for them, it wasn't about the money. It was about solving a creative problem they were having right then.
And beyond music, he was also a visual artist.
A successful one. He'd studied at the San Francisco Art Institute as a kid, but gave it up for music. In the late '80s, he got back into it. Drawings, etchings, watercolors.
And it wasn't just a hobby. His art was licensed for merchandise, including the J. Garcia necktie collection.
The ultimate contradiction, right? The counterculture icon designs neckties for Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
And they were a huge commercial success.
Okay, let's talk about the gear. The guitars of Jerry Garcia are legendary in their own right.
They are, especially the custom ones built by the luthier Doug Irwin.
The first big one was Wolf from 1973. It cost $1,500, which was a fortune back then.
And it was incredibly high-tech. It had active internal electronics, a built-in buffer and preamp, which was key to his clean, sustained tone.
And then came Tiger in 1979.
Tiger was a beast. Made of these dense, exotic woods. It weighed 13.5 pounds.
Whoa.
The weight gave it incredible sustain. And it had this complex switching system that let him blend all the pickups. That was his main guitar for 11 years, right up to the very last show.
And the innovation just kept going. The last custom, Rosebud, from 1990, had MIDI capability.
MIDI. So he could use his guitar to control a synthesizer.
Yeah.
You can hear it on live albums from that era, like Without a Net. He was always searching for a new sound.
And we can't forget his amp, the Budman.
the Macintosh MC 2300, nicknamed for the Budweiser sticker on it. It was the longest continuously used piece of gear in their whole history, from 73 to 93.
Then, after he died, there was this whole legal battle over Wolf and Tiger.
Yeah, it got ugly. Garcia left the guitars to Doug Irwin in his will, but the band sued, saying they were band property.
Who ended up with them?
Irwin won the lawsuit in 2001, but he had to auction them, and they sold for a staggering amount, over $1.7 million for the pair in 2002.
Wow.
And then Wolf was re-auctioned for charity in 2017 for $1.9 million. By itself, they're not just guitars, they're cultural artifacts.
The story of the Dead is completely inseparable from the story of the Deadheads.
They're two sides of the same coin. This fan base became a real community, a traveling city that followed the band everywhere.
And what drew them was that every show was unique. You had to be there.
You did. And this whole ecosystem grew up around the shows. The parking lot scene, Shakedown Street.
Where you could buy anything from a grilled cheese to homemade T-shirts.
To, most importantly, tapes of other concerts.
The Deadheads were also meticulous archivists. They tracked every set list, compared every version of every song. It was like a form of scholarship.
And that culture of sharing was officially sanctioned by the band, which was completely revolutionary at the time.
The taping policy. This was the genius move.
They didn't just tolerate fans recording their shows, they encouraged it. The only rule was you couldn't sell the tapes for a profit.
And they eventually set up a dedicated tapers section right behind the soundboard for the best possible sound.
It's now seen as this brilliant marketing strategy. The book Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead highlights it. They gave the music away for free,
which created this incredibly invested community that then drove demand for concert tickets, which is where the real money was.
Exactly. Of the 2,350 shows they played, almost 2,200 of them were taped by fans.
But that massive community, that traveling city, it eventually got too big to control.
It did. The mellow reputation was generally true, but by the mid-90s, the scene was getting rougher around the edges.
The sources point to the riot at the Deer Creek Music Center in Indiana, July 1995.
That was a real breaking point. Hundreds of people without tickets tried to crash the gates, fighting with police. The next show was canceled, and Garcia was devastated. He realized they couldn't guarantee a safe environment anymore.
It's that tension of trying to maintain a counterculture vibe on a corporate rock scale.
And speaking of corporate, their non-commercial approach to taping existed right alongside a very sophisticated approach to their business.
This is the other great contradiction. Their lawyer, Halkant the Tsar, was a genius.
He was. He made sure the band retained ownership of their music masters and their publishing rights.
Which was incredibly rare for that era. Most bands signed that stuff away.
But the Dead understood that the real value was in the live experience, so they used that as leverage to keep control of their recordings. And that decision paid off for decades. It's why their archival release program is so successful today.
So they managed to balance this free exchange ethos with really smart financial planning.
Two separate revenue streams, perfectly balanced.
And their unique cultural status even led to some unexpected international diplomacy.
The Lithuanian basketball team at the 1992 Olympics.
Right. They had just gained independence from the Soviet Union and had no money.
So the Grateful Dead heard about it and paid for the team's transportation to Barcelona.
And more famously, they sent them those iconic tie-dyed jerseys with the skeleton dunking a basketball.
Which became this global symbol of freedom and defiance. It's an incredible story.
After Garcia died, the music, of course, continued.
Yeah, the surviving members reunited in various forms, the other ones, the Dead.
And then the big 50th anniversary shows in 2015, the Fare Thee Well concerts.
Which led to the formation of Dead & Company with John Mayer, which was massively successful, touring right up until 2023. It just proves the music is timeless.
But the truly permanent legacy is the Grateful Dead archive at UC Santa Cruz.
That donation in 2008 solidified them as a subject of serious academic study. It's one of the most important popular culture collections of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Their legacy is literally locked in for future generations to study. So if you're to boil it all down, the key takeaway with the Grateful Dead is their ability to just integrate completely contradictory ideas into a model that worked.
Right. You have this highly experimental out there music that's built on a foundation of traditional American folk songs.
You have massive commercial success as a touring act, which was funded by what were basically anti-commercial policies, like letting people tape and trade your shows for free.
And you have a band structure that thrived on this idea of no leader.
Even though the whole operation revolved around the genius and the health crises of one person, Jerry Garcia. It's fascinating.
And it all comes back to their really sophisticated strategy around their intellectual property. We talked about their lawyer, Hal Kant.
They were so revolutionary. They encouraged the fans to record and share the live shows, but they simultaneously kept ironclad ownership of their masters and publishing.
They gave away the performance because they knew the experience was what people would pay for.
Exactly. They protected the underlying asset, which allowed them to pivot into the hugely lucrative archival market later on.
And this raises a really fascinating question for you, the listener, to think about. In our current digital world, where sharing content is so easy and so contentious, what does that original free exchange, no profit ethos really mean when you put it next to a very deliberate, financially smart strategy of retaining your core creative ownership?
They somehow made freedom and ownership work together. They made them symbiotic. And that tension, how you let your fans be your best marketers without losing control of the value of your work, is still something the entire media world is trying to figure out today.